Okay, so can big long-term projects, over time, particularly with technology-related projects, people seem to be concerned that technology may change and better technologies might become available over the course of the project. How do you think project managers should deal with that?
Well, first off, using the words big, long-term, and technology in the same sentence make me nervous. Um, Anything that's a large undertaking, technology or not, especially technology, given how rapidly it changes, I would argue that you need to break those projects down into manageable pieces. And what I mean by that is, if you're not planning such that you're proving business value at least in every 6 months of the project, you probably got to give it a rethink. If you're working on a project, as an example, that you really won't know if you've got any benefits at all till the end of, say, 2 years, imagine the discussion you're having with senior management that says, what you guys are taking on here, what we're taking on, is 2 years of time, energy, sweat, and money, and you will not know if you're going to gain any value at all until the end. Most executives I deal with will then ask the question, well, how will I know as it moves along? That's a good question. To my earlier point about knowing when you've won on a project at the end, the secondary question is that you're moving along, how do you know you're winning? So let's imagine a scenario where we have a 2-year long large technology project. It is a legitimate question from the executive. As a matter of fact, one I would expect. Well, let's say we're 3 months into it. The CEO comes down to the project war room and says, so Ken, how's it going? And I say, it's going good. And he says, how will you know? I need to be able to answer that question. I can't answer it with things like, well, the team's in place, or the server is up and running. From the point of view of the CEO, that has no value. He could care less. He says, I'm doing this for business value. What are you seeing that is telling me that we are on our way to achieving business value? What are the markers along the way? Can I prove value inside 6 months? Can I at least have the markers that point to the fact that we're providing business value? Will I have a pilot system up? Is there something they can see and touch that's tangible? The problem with big, complicated technology projects is you don't get the interim markers of success as you go along. It's a matter of, trust me, it's going to be great when we get there. How's it going? Good. The network's up. Who cares if the network's up? I want it from the business point of view. That's not the end result I'm looking for. So I would suggest taking these major projects, or programs if you will, breaking them down into manageable phases, and each of those phases should have tangible measures of success that resonate with the people that you're doing it for, as opposed to technically. If you give me a large program plan, and let's say you've done the work to your measures of success at the end, I will ask you, what are you seeing along the way that are tangible measures that tell me we're going to be successful?
Okay, so the formal measurement of the progress of a project, do you use formal measures, or are you more concerned with the achievements that you're making as you move through the project?
It's absolutely achievements. It's all about the deliverables. It's why I'm allergic to things like percentage complete. I mean, measuring a project, I believe in earned value, but frankly, most of us haven't got a sophisticated enough environment to do full earned value. I mean, setting up a project to do earned value measurement is a complex, it requires planning and tracking measurement that most organizations are not willing to invest in and don't have the sophistication to do anyways. Let's simplify that. Say that does have to be deliverables along the way. Here's my problem with percentage complete as an example. Percentage complete is valuable if I'm doing something tangible that I can look at. If I'm paving a parking lot and you can see that I paved 50% of it, then a 50% complete might be legitimate. But if I'm reporting 50% complete on requirements gathering on a software development project, how the hell do I know when 50% of the requirements are gathered? Let me be cynical about this. I've seen vendors report on projects. They say they're supposed to be doing a month worth of the requirement gathering piece of the project is a month. And they report they're 50% complete. So how do you know you're 50% complete? Well, we're 50% of the way through the month. We've spent 50% of the money. That percentage complete has no reference to the completeness. It's how much you've expended. So measures like percentage complete, unless you're doing something very tangible that you can see and touch and taste, I think are not legitimate in what most of the projects we're doing nowadays. So I'm very skeptical of that kind of measure.
Very interesting. And my next question is, are there projects that should never be started?
Absolutely.
Okay. What should a project manager do about those if they're asked to take one on?
One of my students years ago, we were doing research, and it turns out that some of the best project management organizations in the world will regularly cancel a third of their projects. And that's not bad fun. That's just good understanding of situations changing. Look, I'm in Alberta right now. Look what's happened to the oil price. It's fallen back 60%. There are projects that were started under a given set of circumstances. Those circumstances changes, and it makes perfect sense to stop those projects. All of us have been on a must-do project. There's no such thing as a must-do project. I'll ask a client, what if the price goes to 3 times your estimate? Well, then we'd stop. Well, then it's clearly not a must-do project. It's a due project under a set of circumstances. What the project manager needs to identify is what set of circumstances under which in the environment we will continue with this project and under which conditions it makes sense to stop. So on all my projects, I will put not only checkpoints, back to my earlier point about how do we know we're doing well, but potential off-ramps as well. That is, what are the conditions under which we would stop this project? So I refer back to a movie that was made a number of years ago where Robert De Niro called, what's it called? The Shogun, the something, Ronin, that was what it was called. Mm-hmm. There's a scene in which he goes into a shabby little French cafe to meet a group of terrorists for hire. And before he goes in, he puts a gun under a milk crate at the back door. And this leader of this group of terrorists for hire sees that he does this and asks him, what's with the gun under the milk crate at the back door? And he gives the perfect project manager's answer. He says, lady, I never walk into a room without a plan for walking back out again. I would suggest that's the case for every project. If your project doesn't have off-ramps in it that say, at this point in time, if these things are not true, stop. So, to your question, there's 2 parts. There are dumb projects in the first place, and then there are projects that as things progress, they turn out to not be achieving their objectives. Those are dumb as they unravel. So the second one is off-ramps in your project. People call them stage gates, although stage gating is badly used too. Stage gates that say, should we proceed? The first one, if the project doesn't make sense in the first place, if I can't get people to rely on measures of success to begin with, if I can't get the answers to the done on the one that everybody says, yeah, I agree, I wouldn't do it. Now, I've heard project managers say, well, I have to. Well, it's your choice. If you have to do something dumb that's going to negatively impact your reputation, I can't stop it. But I think in an unemotional way, you want to ask the questions. And you ask the questions in the most powerful way a project manager can ask them. You start with, I need your help. As a project manager, senior management, I would say, I need your help. In order to do a good job, I need to understand the measure of success, and we need to have everybody lined up. And if we can't get those, then why would I step into that project in the first place? We all know about project failures. I get pulled in to look at enough of them. Interesting, when I ask people, when did you know this project was in trouble? The answer is almost invariably right at the beginning. And if you knew right at the beginning, then why did you proceed?
Absolutely.
It gets better. It starts bad, it doesn't tend to get better. It tends to get worse.
Absolutely. So, how do you get the results of a project adopted? You've been given a project to do, you're working on it, it may be finished, but people in the organization aren't interested in adopting the what you've created in the project. What do you do about that?
Well, that's interesting. I don't think you should have ever let yourself get into that position in the first place, because the people that have to adopt are absolutely fundamental stakeholders. And at the very beginning, I'm asking, all right, what are your set of expectations out of this project, and what can the project do to deliver those expectations? And if that isn't absolutely clear and they're not bought into it, why am I doing it in the first place? I don't want to be doing a project where it ends and then you go drop it on someone and hope that they like it. They need to be involved from the very beginning. I mean, when I talk about my project plan, if I'm doing it right, it has a set of deliverables where all my stakeholders can look at my plan, and not a Gantt chart and not a PERT chart, because we care about that stuff and nobody else does. I want a visual that has a set of milestones that says, this deliverable, does this mean something to you? So I can take a stakeholder that's non-technical and they can say, yes, if you do those 3 things, that will meet my expectations. And I need to be doing that as I go at the beginning and as I go along. I don't want to be, if I come into a situation where I drop something and hope for acceptance at the end, to a large extent, that's my own fault. I mean, as the project manager, I should be working with the people that are sponsoring to ask, how engaged are these people? And I want a tangible evidence of their engagement. If I haven't been talking to the people who are going to be using this thing all the way along, that's a huge risk that I don't want to take on.
Makes sense. So the last question I've got for you, Ken, is any final words of advice that you might have for the students? Many of them are going to be going into careers where projects will be a big part of what they do. They're engineers, scientists, and that type of background. So what words of advice would you have for them as they go out to work?
Well, and one of them I said earlier, it's the most powerful thing a project manager can do in an approach. You start any conversation with, I need your help. When you're working with people and you say, I need your help, first thing it says, I respect you enough to ask, and I'm looking for input. That's a very strong way to start. And the second thing I would say is always look outside yourself, because these projects are fundamentally not about you. As a project manager, you are an enabler, but it's all about other people. So the natural go-to perspective for many project managers would be think about not about yourself first. Think about the perspective of everyone around. What are they looking for? What do they need? What do they want? And do those line up? So if you become someone who gets used to looking at the external stakeholder view first, that will set you up well in your, let's call it your project management career going ahead. So ask for help and always look at everyone else's perspectives first.
Thank you, Ken.
Notice that neither of those are technical. You didn't hear me say get good at critical path compression. I didn't say get good at GANs and PERTs. That stuff is important, but they're not going to make a difference in whether you're successful or not.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ken, for talking to the students today. It's the discussion, I think, has been a very valuable one. We've talked about areas where conventional thinking on project management might differ a little bit from some of the things that you've said, but I think valuable advice for the students and a lot for them to think about. So thanks for taking the time, Ken.
I appreciate taking the time yourself. Thank you.